So mentioned Gaiden 4 just came out a couple of days ago, and honestly, the system requirements are pretty low. Minimum system requirements is Intel i5-8400 and a GTX 1060 or an RX 590, which are fairly old CPUs and GPUs. The recommended settings, not much better. We're talking i5-10400 or Intel i5-10400 or a Ryzen 5 3600, only 16 gigs of RAM, and a RTX 2060 or an RX 5700 XT. So not overly demanding for 1080p 60 FPS. In this video, we're going to be testing it out with a Ryzen 9800X 3D and an AMD RX 9070 XT. So a little overkill considering the recommended settings. All right, so jumping into the game, this is essentially right after the introduction, and we are averaging 94 FPS at 4K with max settings. Let's go in and I'll show you the settings. So we got it set to 4K. Frame rate is 240, VSync is turned off, FSR is disabled. We do have anti-aliasing turned on, and we got the graphics preset set to high. To the rear, back in the game, average 90 FPS, 94 FPS, the 1% low is down to 92, and the 0.1% low is at 83. Oddly enough, right now we are using around 98% of the 9070 XT, so it is essentially maxed out. But the 9800 XT is only using 9-10%, so CPU-wise, it is not very demanding. However, just looking at the game, it's not... Yeah, it doesn't look like a very, it's not very graphically intensive, and just looking at it, it doesn't look, the graphics just don't look that great on the game. But it is nice to see a newer game come out that a lot of older hardware is going to be able to run no problem. So running through this terrain, it's have a little bit of a spike right there, but overall, it seems to be fairly well optimized in the sense that there's no major pings. The 1% low and 0.1% low are not far off from the average FPS. So Ninja 84 is based on Platinum Games' in-house gaming engine. And as you can see, just looking at the rain, it's not that great. So I've seen much better rain in games like Assassin's Creed Shadows. However, that game is a lot more demanding than this one. Yeah, so even during that little fight scene, the FPS is still relatively the same. All right, so with 4K getting such high FPS native without any sort of upscaling turned on, so far let's see how it performs at other resolutions. All right, so moving to 1440p, keeping everything else the same, the FPS jumps considerably more. So now we are averaging, just at this point in time, 176 with the 1% low of 168 and 0.1% low of 156. I think we're starting to get into a little bit of a CPU bottleneck. I don't know how, because we're only using like 16% of the 9800X 3D, but we're hovering around 96-95% GPU utilization. Now, as we're running around here, it's starting to jump a little bit more, I believe. Yeah, even after that little fight scene, the 1% low, 0.1% low did drop a little bit, but the average is still staying pretty high at 196. And it's going up because the current FPS is around 215. Again, the graphics on this game just seem so old. All right, so moving on to 1080p, similar frame rate is because it's not really uncapped. It's capped at 240, which should, well, I'm actually probably will be an issue now, going in 1080p. No upscaling and anti-aliasing turned on. Yeah, so CPU utilization bumped up a little further to the low 20s. We were hovering around 22, 23%. And the 9070 XT is at 84, 85% utilization. The FPS is capped at 244, and we're hitting around 240 at the moment. Then those 1% and 0.1% lows are a little bit lower. All right, so now we're in a city, and the average FPS really hasn't changed much. So I am seeing the CPU utilization jump to 30-ish, 31%, and the GPU utilization jumped to about 95%. So the city does seem to be a little more demanding than in the cave. Yeah, so even during fight scenes, the 1% low and 0.1% low and average don't change very much. So average 239, and the 1% low and 0.1% low are relatively high as well. So after all that, the FPS went from 240 to 235, and the 1% low and 0.1% low pretty much stayed the same. So overall, the game seems to be well optimized from the fact that the frame time graph doesn't move very much. The 1% low and 0.1% low stay relatively high compared to the average FPS. The only thing is that it is, yeah, based on it having such a high FPS, it's not an overly graphically intense game. And looking at it, kind of backs that up because it doesn't look that great, at least in my opinion. But it's always nice to see newer games that are coming out that newer, older hardware can still run. So 1060, when did that come out? Like 6 years ago, I think, give or take. It could be longer than that. So there's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to be able to play this game.